Engage tire stickers. Why do you leave them on there, dude? Why don't you take them off, man? Nature will take them off when it's ready. This is the T100 update. We're gonna work with the sun right now. Last time you guys saw this, dash was done. What else? Front was painted, stuff was going back together. At this point, everything is powder coated. That needs to be powder coated. Everything is put on, 40s are on, shocks are on, panels are on. Just got back from wiring. Tanner with Independence Electric wired the whole thing. Not a complete wire, but just made things work. Like, we obviously put the gauges in different places than they were originally. We added a switch pro up top, a 12-button switch pro. Added a bunch of dome lights, rear facing bar up there, plugs for taillights if we ever want to run like small RTLs in the bedside, and the air conditioner. So, and miscellaneous other stuff, but that's the gist of this thing. We can kind of go over some of the details now that it's together, but really this is another transition update. It's gone through its fabrication phase, its powder coat. Now it's done with wiring, and now it's going to be, the steps for it this week are actually going to be corner scale. We'll get out our scales. We'll put this thing on those, figure out what the balance is. We'll go through all of our spec sheet with Keith. KDM does this. I'm sure we've talked about it before, but KDM does valving with all our stuff. It's so key to have good valving done in these things. You can build a gnarly tube chassis center mount car and buy shocks off the shelf, and you will not get the performance that you should. I would say you'd cut yourself in half by 50% at least, not getting the valving right. So Keith does it's a pretty extensive list of measurements that he wants. So, you know, we corner scale it, we give him those numbers, and then we have to do this spreadsheet. Usually Alex does it, and fill all that out to him, and then we'll take all the coilover bypass off, get that to him, and he'll blow them apart, and he'll go through and do a bench valve, which will be, call it like an 80% good valve. He'll put proper springs on. I mean, this is the springs that it had, but to know if this is right, it's never had suspension tuning ever, so might need different springs. He'll put those on, put the things back together, and then we'll go out to the desert and we'll dial in the last 20%. We might need to swap springs, maybe. Sometimes that happens, but the shocks really won't need any internal adjustment. They'll just be external adjustment with the bypass tubes. So that's the timing with that, is get all this stuff to him, put the thing on struts, which is just like a not a permanent, but a static tube that goes from upper shock mount to trailing arm, and same with the front. And we'll send it to Upholstery like that, because they don't need the shocks on it. And then Keith can have some extra time. It's not a rush. When we get it back from Upholstery, that'll probably be our next check-in, and it'll be time to go test it. We're not going to do any paint touch-up on anything until we're done testing, just for obvious reasons. Amir can have it back all shiny and nice. But right now it's in its phase of, there's a couple things to just to dial in. Like, I know the fire suppression, all of the plumbing is ran, but the bottles aren't in there yet. And that was just to get a window with Tanner to do the electrical where we needed to get it to him. And we cut a couple things just to make sure that he could get his stuff done. So let's check it out. this view, this is probably my most enjoyable view. This truck's been I could probably say every vehicle has been like a design exercise, but this one's been really fun because it gave us a lot of good flowy shape from the start. We wanted to do something where it was like a facelift for an older car. It was dated, like, you know, you can see there's a missing tube here, and this is like just so the radiator can come out, and it's in here. And that'll go on for final. But it had like this crazy bumper on it, and it just had a lot of like old school stuff. And then it had 37-inch Generals, which are just a terrible, heavy, hard, crude tire. You know, it just dated things, and that was the goal, is just to give it some kind of a modernization or a facelift, while still retaining some of the OG stuff. And like, I just think this whole package, like the mirrors and the hood scoop and the symmetry and like the upper light and the lights in the headlamps, like all of this makes sense. And it's came out pretty good. All the wiring is proper for street driving now too. So there's like highs, lows, blinkers. Same with the rear tail light. That's on like a momentary switch for the brakes, and then just a running switch for the lights. All that is on Switch Pro. I'm like really not acclimated to technology with the Switch Pro, so you know, when I see all this being operated off of a phone app, it's satisfying, and I think that's going to be good for Amir. It's also passcode protected, so like to start this thing you have to enter a passcode to even get the ignition to go on. All that stuff makes it really nice for being able to drive it on the street and take it somewhere. We're gonna touch on design. There's a lot going on here with profile, right? Like if you look at some of the leading edge of the windshield and how the opening of the scoop follows that, and then this profile comes in. What was important with all the rear tin work, and I might have covered this before, is the chassis itself. This is the chassis profile tube. This thing runs, and it actually runs really low. So none of this brake that you see where there's like a surface change on here, that's just incorporated into the tin work, but it's not an actual part of the chassis. And I really wanted to draw this higher. Very similar, like I think a lot of the presence of like a short wheelbase tube chassis cars where they have the shocks buried inside the cabin renders a chopped rear window similar to Vivian. A lot of Weitzel cars have it. And this profile, cleaning this up where there's this raised haunch in the back, and then drawing it back like that, and the same with the roof scoop actually leading off. So there's positive, like there's another panel in here that ducts all the air in. So there's a rear light bar back here, and then it's got this trim piece in here that directs the flow into the coolers, but it also leads off here, so it just kind of pulls tension like that, where it's not just the end of a cab and then a flat, 90 degree, and then straight out like a bed of a truck. And that's really important. The bedside mounts are something I'll probably cover with a little camera. What we ended up doing for bedsides is 97-03, 12-inch flat top, Trailer Products glass. It fit really nice. I actually had Alex go to my house and grab a pair off Beth, and just to see before we ordered, like if it fit, and it fit so good that I just sacrificed them and we used them for mock-up. While we were waiting for the glass from Trailer Products. So that stuff goes on. It's not painted yet. There's some good like ventilation cuts like we do with stainless woven mesh in here. Bedside mounts. When we did the bedside mounts, everything's contoured, so it's obviously removable. There's tube connectors in here. And then everything is contoured to the actual bedside so that you can see there's like a radius in here. And then this is a nice feature too. Instead of just having like your pickups for the front of the glass and your pickups for the rear of the glass, you have a intermediate section. And it's also nice to have that on tube connectors, because when you service this thing, or when you need to powder coat it or whatever, you don't want to have to take this off and then have this big old long structure that's connected over here. You want to be able to just remove this, remove the middle, remove the front. But this is also nice because you can stand on it. If you just know that at the very edge of the bedside, you can there's support there, then you can stand on this to get into here without worrying about the compromise of the flare. Because, you know, like I said, it's a 12-inch bedside, so this starts here and it goes out 12 inches and it's a flat top, like where you could have lunch on it. New hooks for the 40s. We always like to get a win with these. The Y straps lend themselves to be very particular on eyelets and how they work on cars, and so really we like to make custom ones. We do it on most stuff where they're favorable for the eyelets and they look good on the car. Something to note with Y straps. I forget who told me this. It might have been Kevin with H&M, but the system for Y straps is you never want to have the primary, like the latch in the middle of the tire in the rear, you know, or if you're running dual spares, you don't want to have a strap of any sort dead center in the rear, because if there's contact, even if you're not racing, but say your buddy hits you or anything, or you back into something or whatever, if there's contact, this can easily get hit, like if there's a strap here, and snap, and then it compromises your tires and they could just disappear on a trail somewhere. You can see the RTL bar in here. And you can see it's just a kind of an opening back here to the front of the car. So RTL hangs out, all the cooling. The jack's hiding in here. It's a little dusty right now. Chocks in. It's gonna have to be a 90 off of the coil over here with the reservoir. The reservoir does have a mount. So when we get this going for Keith, we'll have all that stuff set up. The mirrors, let me see if the glare is better on the other side, or not as bad. There we go. The mirrors are something we really took into account. Amir wanted something custom. He wanted like a tubular, call it like a Baja style mirror or something. And we wanted to put our own spin on there, incorporating some shapes like the plate in there with the tube. You know, another thing we like to do with styling is we like to run a lot of our tube structure with a bend that leads into a miter joint. And if you notice, when we do a lot of builds, it's kind of a common theme, is finding nice ways to do not just miters or not just bends, but incorporate them with a balance. The light bar is the same kind of thing. It trickles into here. The mounts are still styled with the truck. And then there's a glare guard on there. Anybody who knows my past, Joey's nodding. I spent at least 2 years doing, when light bars were really popping on trucks, I spent like 2 years building light bar mounts for vehicles in my driveway on the weekends. That was like my hustle. I'd either do two trucks in one day, or like 3 or 4 in a weekend. My neighbor probably wasn't pumped, but I had seniority because we lived there so long, but I was just welding, like I was usually welding tabs right in here with silicone bronze, and then floating a bar, making like a cool bracket out of stainless steel with like a nice cutout in it. And I really cut my teeth doing that stuff. That was a part of my story. And it's been fun to incorporate, you know, a light bar into the T100. The issue with light bars is they do produce glare, quite a bit of glare, mostly on like the the front hood area, sometimes on the windshield. So the most efficient way to combat that is to run a glare guard. And that's what we have here. So we tried to do it as tidy as we could. There's a really nice detail on the roof scoop too that's like a bead roll detail. I'll see if I can't get it for you guys. Just there's a good shape off this thing. So this will get a windshield. Like I said, there's no point in doing any of that until we get all the upholstery done. Leave the back window out, leave the windshield out, and then they can wrap the upholstery however they need to. This is the mess you get in here right now. Things to note. You can see the fire suppression going through here. There's going to be 2 bottles. You can see where there's just like a dead end of hard line with a zip tie on each side. That's where it'll go into the bottles. Map lights, you can see our upper console we added here. There's window switches in there, so driver and passenger window switches. That made more sense to me than getting those things mounted on the door panels. It's very, you know, there's a lot of cars, like European cars and stuff that have it in the middle, and it makes more sense to me. And then you can see the Switch Pro. Something to note here is how loosey-goosey, well, these things are like in there really shitty, and you can see there's like a lot of gap around here, and that's all for upholstery. All this stuff we had to go back through and like clean up and gap, just so we know the upholstery can wrap around. AC, battery disconnect, pedals are in. You can see the AC vents for your crotch area. That makes the most sense to me. You know, it's a pretty small cab, so really you have these 2 guys that are adjustable. These are Restomod vents. I don't think anybody does better than Restomod these days with aftermarket air conditioning systems. And then you can see the faceplates for the dash. This is the kind of the last detail we wanted to do, and we'll leave these raw. Matt cut these M26. Known Matt for a while, and he's been able to help me with some of just these like little onesie-twosie jobs. A lot of machine shops are tied down with bigger stuff, and for him to be able to stop and put time into just taking care of me like that, I appreciate it. So this whole thing, like what I'd expect here, I don't know how bad the sun is. Were the door panels done last time?
I think they were done, no.
Okay.
No, they weren't. I don't even think they were started.
Okay, cool. So we'll cover the door panels. You can see there's some pretty good flow here. They meet up with the dash, or the instrument panel, as some people say. That was my intent, is to, like, there's a profile that goes on here. So you have your normal belt line here, where the window line is, and then you have this profile of the door panel that really encapsulates the instrument panel and ties it into the doors. And this is a really strong feature that I've done on a couple vehicles, and I love that. So that whole thing goes through there. Same on the other side. You have to understand these are not symmetrical door panels. I mean, like some of the details, like the plates are and everything, like where it follows the door bar. But obviously the driver's side pod is higher than the passenger side, so that raise is going to be a lot more profound. I'll show you. So you can see this is just a lot higher. It's doing the same thing. And then the door bar itself protrudes. So we have a lot of mass here. This is all aluminum, and you can see how it notches right into the door bar. Same with the bottles down there. Secondary fire extinguisher bottles. That's just the nook they get. I would call those 3D door panels. They're extremely satisfying. Where I left off before I started talking about the door panels was the upholstery. That's what we're gonna expect here is full upholstery. So full carpet throughout, no tubes really exposed, headliner, all of the dash, instrument panel, center console, upper console, all that stuff to be all like laid up with foam, and then Alcantara over it. Nice stitching everywhere. Same with the back wall. Just everything you see pretty much covered. I know this guy does really good, and we'll kind of talk about him when we get there and we get to that process. But that's the exciting part here. We got one other dash upholstered. That was the Black Bronco, and so there was already some lessons I learned with that one, just especially with clearancing and gapping stuff properly. It's a real teamwork thing to get that right. So that kind of closes out the interior. You can see the fire suppression poles too. All this stuff is like ergonomically based, right? So it's like the poles are located like that. It's same if you're sitting there, how can you reach that easily? You pull this down, ping, and then pull the strap, and so your range of motion wants to be natural. Instead of, if it's this way, it could be even different if you're in a bind, so you want to just do everything where it's easy. It's the same with the windows right there. Just makes more sense. There is a brake upgrade we did in here, and I'd rather just show you guys how well that works instead of talk about it. And I don't even know if I'm going to share the special recipe with that because it's so good. I feel like it's a life hack. A lot of times with pre-runners, Joey, let's open the hood. A lot of times with pre-runners, they have manual brakes and they're dog shit, and you have to have like this long pedal, just to get a good leverage ratio. And you're always cautious about driving them on the street and stuff because they're just manual brakes on a big truck, and it's never fun. And these brakes are at a point where you can give it 20% input and it's going to lock up all fours at all times on tarmac or whatever you want. Teamwork. A lot of new power steering stuff. You can see a pressure relief valve, big filter reservoir, and then a big PSS pump in here. That's all. And what we also did is got the servo upgraded. That's all to take care of the 40s. So once you put big tires on here like that, if your truck is steering for you and you're not able to be in control of it, then that's a problem. It's not supposed to be like that. So just upgrading everything we could. The rack was the only thing we couldn't upgrade. The rack should be efficient, sufficient, but really just getting the pump, pressure relief valve, high pressure lines, and then getting the servo upgraded too is key on that. I know a lot of people are probably like, they need to leave all the door panel and the dash raw, and I totally get that. But for long-term sustainability, if this was like a show truck or it was just going to be garaged and used not so often, I'd say for sure that's cool. The aluminum would last a lot longer under raw conditions like this than the steel. You can even see like there's some rust starting right there. So you'd have to be extremely mindful of it. And the other detrimental thing with that is the sunlight reflecting on instrument panels and pods. If you're driving where you need extreme focus, having the sun bounce off of the surfaces in front of you is just not a win at all. So it's really getting that suede on there. The Alcantara is a complete thing of functionality, and that's why I see a lot of rally cars and race cars. It's the same deal. They'll have a full body and white chassis with raw everything, no upholstery, no interior at all, and they'll just have an Alcantara dash because it's taking all the highlight and the reflection out of your focus area. Something else that's cool, Oh, again, I really like the bedside mounts. They like, even without a bedside on there, they have some really good shape. They're just a nice piece. But the exhaust, this is where our exhaust exits. It's like just, you know, right out of the rear skid. It can't really be damaged or anything, and it quiets it down. That was the whole intent, is just to try to get this thing quiet where he could drive on the street and it's not obnoxious and loud. See the X pipe under here? So she's ready. We'll just get these shocks going and get her to upholstery. Okay, that's our update. So next steps, all the information for Keith for the shocks, KDM. On that note, if you guys, I want to help Keith with road car stuff. If you guys have some kind of a road race team or something, I want to start incorporating that. And if you have the ability to work with him on tuning shocks for road stuff, hit me up or hit Keith up. On that note, get those things to him. Struts in, final the suppression, final anything else, obviously get the seats in, and then get this thing to upholstery. Once we get it back from upholstery, we'll check back in. Thanks, guys.